The Dead by Daylight community is toxic. You've no doubt heard this about the game at some point. In fact, before I started playing it, it was the first thing I knew about it. Everyone I knew who spoke about it said the same things. The community is awful, survivors are mean, killers play unfairly. While I'm no stranger to toxic gaming communities, what I heard about Dead by Daylight felt different. For one, I guess I didn't consider Dead by Daylight a very competitive game. It always came off as a party game to me, and in fact, that's how I play it these days. Second, the ire of the community wasn't aimed at the devs, it was aimed at each other. Everyone's always complaining about teabagging survivors, face camping killers, tunneling, whatever that is, broken hitboxes, and horrible code. This doesn't happen in other video games whatsoever, so understandably, I was a little intimidated to try the game. So imagine my surprise when I logged in to play for the first time, and not only was there no apparent toxicity, players were kind and playful. Survivors were definitely teabagging their balls off, yes, but those same survivors were often rather nice in the in-game chat. I thought, hey, maybe everyone is wrong about this game. Maybe they're just overreacting. Coming from over a decade of religiously playing Call of Duty, this was a breath of fresh air by comparison. No 12-year-olds screaming racial slurs in voice chat, not running into complete degenerates in-game, just the sound of meat slipping onto hooks. And then I went online to read up on the game in my spare time. That was my first mistake. See, the toxicity in Dead by Daylight occurs more so offline than anything. Any space dedicated to discussing the game is rife with the seething anger on all sorts of other things that other people do. This discourse then makes the rounds in the community, and everyone eventually is mirroring it. We most recently saw this with the Skull Merchant, with people divided on whether or not she was a good addition to the game. See, there's just something unique about Dead by Daylight that other games just don't have. It's a perfect storm of a few things, as well as many factors. But to summarize them neatly, we can name three major things as contributors to Dead by Daylight's toxicity. 1. The ranking system. 2. The social climate. And 3. The game by design. These three things are the major points that contribute towards the toxicity of the Dead by Daylight community. We're going to look at each one individually, and then I'm going to tell you how I think we can fix them. But before we get into it, hit the sub button, make sure you ring-a-ding the bell, and hit the like button if you want to keep seeing Dead by Daylight content just like this. Without further ado, let's ride. This video was not made with the intention of trashing the Dead by Daylight community, content creators, or the game devs. I think behavior has made a very unique experience, even if it's not necessarily a polished one. Additionally, as a Canadian, I do feel a sense of pride that so many people are playing a Canadian-made game. However, it could be better, and that's the purpose of this video. I want to inspire change in a positive direction, so we can keep enjoying this game for years to come. Throughout the duration of this video, I'm going to be pulling examples and source material cited from this study. This is a study conducted by academics from the University of Quebec in Montreal. The behavioral study was conducted using data sets from the game's official subreddit to understand how, why, and what was considered toxic by the community at large, and what the contributing factors to this toxicity are. The study states, the goal of this article is to identify key causes and factors that may lead to toxic in-game interaction, according to players' perception. We studied the Dead by Daylight community using a content analysis of players' conversations on the game's official subreddit to help us better understand how they perceive potential toxic behavior inside the game. Honestly, the study is fascinating, if a little dense, and I absolutely recommend anyone interested in the subject to read it. From this point forward, the study will refer to this study. The first point we're going to explore is the MMR system. The feature has more or less always been around in some form, but previously took the form of ranks. That is, you were matched with players of similar rank. Later in the update 5.2.0, skill-based matchmaking was implemented, making ranks obsolete, and instead introducing grades. The difference here, I'm assuming, is that skill-based matchmaking takes your performance into account rather than just a static rank number when creating a lobby. All pretty standard stuff in a multiplayer game. However, unlike many multiplayer games, there is no casual mode to accompany this. There is no unranked playlist, and if you wanted to play a pressure-free game for the sake of enjoying it, you need to have friends, which is already hard for some of us to do, and then play with those friends in a custom game. Fine, I guess, but what if no one's available? Well, there's no casual play, so I guess you're just risking your rank with it, kiddo. Anyway, needing to slot into ranked matchmaking means there's always something on the line. There's always pressure to perform, and thus every match matters. In other games, you can just relax and get matched into an unranked ranked lobby with players who are just messing around. While the lack of a casual mode doesn't mean there aren't casual players, it does mean that there is an inconsistency in experiences. This inconsistency is something that will keep rearing its head in this video, by the way, so remember it. One game you could be face to face with a face camping Bubba, and the next game you could be faced with a trapper who's just having some light fun with their traps. For new players or players set on a goal, this can add a lot of stress to their game. Now yes, people who are not having fun should stop playing the game. But what good does it do for the community at large if a pissed off player is taking to forums to complain? This gets explored in the study, by the way, with the following excerpt stating, "Our results reveal that players may define victory in different and ambiguous ways. The situation is more complex than it seems, and the community distinguishes between a range of good victories and playing styles. For instance, some killers consider winning to mean killing all survivors, or 4 kills, while others consider 2 kills and resource collection enough to win. Some survivors consider themselves to have won only if the whole team escapes, while others want to complete certain tasks beyond their main goal in order to improve their avatar's stats." This concept is why the unwritten rules of Dead by Daylight exist, by the way. And in case you're wondering what those are, this is a list of valid play strategies that are highly frowned upon by the other side. Much the same way that sitting in a corner in Call of Duty is frustrating for your enemies, camping a hook or tunneling a survivor out of the game is the same. Likewise, using flashlights as a group to blind killers is also frowned upon, despite being a perfectly valid strategy. The variance involved in having everyone use one single matchmaking queue means that you'll always come across players that, through no fault of your own, are upset that you did a thing. If this sounds like it's not a fun time, that's because it isn't. No one wants to play a game to get told to KYS or neck themselves, which does happen in endgame chat more frequently than you'd like to believe. The study even touches on the concept of unwritten rules, pointing out, based on our analysis of posts collected on the subreddit Understudy, it appears that behaviors judged as most toxic inside of the game are, in alphabetical order, blinding, body blocking, face camping, hatch camping, lobby dodging, rush unhooking, sandbagging, slugging, text chatting, and teabagging. Now, an addition of a casual play queue won't solve the toxicity problem. In fact, it might even be a breeding ground for more toxicity, since this is ingrained in the game itself, and there's nothing to lose in a casual queue. However, in tandem with the other steps Dead by Daylight can take, it can make things just a little bit better, and ultimately, I think that's enough of a reason to act on it. Now, what you're about to hear might be a little bit controversial of me to say, but I believe that it is imperative to explaining the rampant toxicity in Dead by Daylight. Are you ready? There's nothing to fucking do. Okay, so you might be thinking, that isn't true. You can do generators as a survivor and killer is a game of hunting survivors. Yeah, that's the issue. Objectively, the worst part of the game is sitting at a generator and hitting QTEs for 90 seconds to fill a bar. Multiply that by 5 times and hopefully you begin to see my point. See, the core game experience for survivors is so unbelievably bare bones that often it's way more fun to get into chases with killers. By the time the novelty of a chase wears off, many begin to learn more advanced techniques for chases like looping and flashlight use and aggressive perks like head-on. To put this into perspective, the core objective for survivors has not changed in 7 years of the game being online. Hell, I played Survivor for a total of 3 months and I was unbelievably bored with the role. Imagine what people who have been playing for 6 years feel like. Add in the fact that there isn't even the variance of meeting and talking to new people in matchmaking, and it's not even passable as a social experience. So when you've already done a thing that isn't particularly challenging, or even scary after a while, no doubt you're going to look for other ways to have fun. Unfortunately for killers, that just happens to be the things they consider toxic. Again, the study touches on this, saying, Dead by Daylight becomes repetitive for those who play a lot, regardless of roles played, which can lead to boredom. Players thus start seeking pleasure and increased interaction with their opponents or partners in other ways. Players thus reinvent their own ways of playing or even create role reversal situations. If it seems like I'm picking on survivors, I promise I'm not. It's a self-sustaining loop of toxicity, and even if it might start with bored survivors, it definitely isn't entirely their fault. Rather, what I mean is that killers and survivors are toxic in different ways. The study puts it perfectly with this excerpt. We notice that both survivors and killers can display allegedly toxic behavior. Killers' toxic behavior is mostly passive. It is considered toxic when they stop moving or when they immobilize a survivor. In acting this way, killers seem to seek revenge for actions they deem illegitimate on the survivor's part, which can feed the toxicity loop. Those actions that killers deem illegitimate are explained further with another paragraph stating, for survivors, toxicity is witnessed in their active behavior, such as attacking or mocking instead of hiding or fleeing away from the killer. While we would expect survivors to run away from the killer because they are vulnerable, and because of the context of the game says so, survivors may be perceived as toxic when they harass or run after the killer. Such behavior is most often witnessed in expert players who set new objectives for themselves that go against the intentions of Dead by Daylight's developers. Things like chasing the killer, double sliding pallets, pointing and waving, teabagging at exit, flashlight clicking are all considered toxic by killers nearly universally. There isn't a single time that I see any of these things that I think, aw, they're trying to communicate. These things go against the intentions of behavior and how they've developed Dead by Daylight and are all generally meant to say, you're trash. So in retaliation, many killers will engage in toxic behavior of their own. This includes hook camping, face camping, tunneling someone until they are dead, body blocking, basement camping, etc. Generally, killer toxicity is reactive, although it's not unheard of for them to be toxic out of the gate. However, due to lack of comms between teams in pre-game lobby, there's no way to gauge what survivors want out of the match. There's also no way to gauge if your survivors are just having fun goofing off or if they're purposely trying to upset you. As a killer, you can only assume those two things are one and the same, and so the survivors end up getting upset, believing they've been treated unfairly, and killers end up mad at survivors for being bullies, and it just goes on and on and on and on. It's a never-ending, self-feeding loop of toxicity, and it's literally just in how the game plays. Any sort of this one-sided toxicity is also compounded by the fact that players will stick to one of the two rules almost exclusively. The study states, confinement to one of the two rules contributes to the trivialization of toxicity, which is perceived as self-defense against one's opponent, especially when one believes that their actions are harmless because they cannot see how they may negatively impact others. As long as Dead by Daylight has no effective way for players to communicate with one another, either in-game, post-game, or pre-game, empathy will always be in short supply for the opposing team. Another thing I would like to touch on in this section is just how much of Dead by Daylight's video content is based on using toxicity to have a good time. Remember that point about expert players setting alternative goals? It rears its head again when we look at YouTube builds. Let's run an experiment. I'm going to type Toxic Dead by Daylight in the YouTube search bar, and let's see just how many suggestions we get and what kind of suggestions we get. Now let's do something unrelated and search for Dead by Daylight build. The fact that builds are being advertised by their ability to annoy the opposing team into disconnecting only helps feed this idea of toxicity being fun. While content creators absolutely do exacerbate these issues, they are not the root cause of the issue. This is just how the Dead by Daylight community is. It's built into the game. So how do we fix this? How do we fix this vicious cycle of toxicity? This Ouroboros of suffering? Well, the big theme here so far has been a lack of communication. I wholeheartedly believe that voice chat in Dead by Daylight would solve a large portion of the game's cultural and balancing problems. However, I want to make clear that this voice chat should be optional, on by default, but you have the option to turn it off if you want. There is literally no good reason in 2023 to not have this feature in any multiplayer game ever made whatsoever. Any arguments against these features at this point is just cope, and I will not hear any of them because they frequently make no sense. There are so many problems solved by the introduction of a voice chat that it is asinine to not add it at this point. However, it might not even matter in the end since the toxicity in the game is pretty much inbuilt to the experience. So what do I mean when I say it's built into the experience? Well, the game is asymmetrical. It's not fair and it isn't meant to be fair either. From the very onset, the cards are stacked against you, no matter what role you play. Survivors are at the mercy of killers in many ways, but killers only have themselves to rely on, and well-coordinated survivors can easily distract a killer and waste their time. Survivors cannot eliminate an annoying or unfair killer. They can only disconnect and incur a penalty, and because there's only a ranked mode and no casual play, this is always a detriment. Likewise, killers are at the mercy of survivors. If survivors are running the killer and bullying an obviously new player, there is little that the killer can do aside from disconnect and lose their blood points and rank placement. Honestly, there isn't much else I can add to this section without beating a dead horse at this point. This is probably the most obvious portion of the video anyway, so this begs the question, how do we fix it? Well, We can't. The game is designed the way the game is designed, the way the game is designed, the way the game is designed. Behavior won't even fix their spaghetti code that leads to something breaking nearly every update. There is absolutely no chance they would change the way the core game experience works. As long as they keep making money from chapter releases and cosmetics, there is no reason for them to do anything about the game design. For 7 years now, the game has been in what is essentially an extended early access state, lacking critical features like accessibility options such as brightness, gamma, and FOV sliders. The argument against having these options is ludicrous, since FOV can be an issue for those who experience motion sickness, and PC players who care to use filters are already using brightness filters on the game anyway. So all that's doing is locking console users out of a feature that PC users have. Not to mention, the core game experience has not changed in 7 years. Survivors are still hitting generators, killers are still hitting survivors, and behavior is still hitting our wallets for what should ultimately be a free-to-play live service game. I don't hate Dead by Daylight, but I am frustrated with what it is versus what it could be. It is the very image of complacency in the game industry, and the poster child for toxic gaming almost anywhere you ask. The problem is so deep at this point, it's cultural and integral to the experience. With new asymmetrical horror games coming out soon, such as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game and Evil Clowns from Outer Space, it's only a matter of time before Dead by Daylight needs to take some sort of concrete step towards expanding the core experience outside of one mode, one playlist, one rotation of maps, and one way to play. While the Steam charts indicate that Dead by Daylight is in a better spot now than it has ever been, it has already hit its peak in 2021. Instead of capitalizing on this burst in player count numbers, they continued to release expected content and failed to grow with their audience. So how do we fix the toxicity problem in Dead by Daylight? We can't. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. This is Snail. I just want to say really quickly before you guys click off, please go ahead and leave me a like on the video if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Leave a comment if you think I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm really happy about the reception to the last video, so I figured I would make another video essay and see how this one turns out. Anyways, until next time, take care, brush your hair, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.